it's almost any company that's been alive for a dozen years, as all of the remaining four companies have been, is usually going to be profitable, well managed, doesn't need a lot of care and feeding, and so it's really hardly even any amount of work to do that anymore. But in any case, we wound down the business, kept the portfolio, managed that, and then in 2003, when the Flatiron portfolio got to be something that was not a full-time job anymore, I teamed up with a man named Brad Bernard and started Unisware Ventures. And our thesis at the time was that the venture capital business was changing and the internet was changing, and that we wanted to create a venture capital firm like Flatiron Partners that was focused on the internet, but that was a little bit more focused. At Flatiron, we pretty much invested in anything that we could possibly, consider was an internet company, and we wanted to do something a lot more focused than that. And we also thought that the venture business was changing, and so I think largely from the lessons that we had learned, and Brad had been in the venture business through the 90s as well, and had experienced the bubble and the burst. We decided to do a bunch of things that, in hindsight, have worked out very well for us. We decided to raise a very small amount of money and operate a very lean partnership, much like the guys at Euclid had. At Flatiron, at its peak, I think we had 25 employees and were managing $500 million. So that was not lean. We decided to only invest in what we call the applications layer of the internet, and we've even refined that focus a lot since then. And it took us a year to raise our first fund, $100 million fund. It ended up being $125 million, but it took us a year to raise it. Most everybody that we talked to thought the internet was a scam, that venture capital was a horrible asset class, and that both of us had come out of firms that had basically wound down in the late 90s and the early part of the 2000s. And so there were questions about our track record, questions about our investment thesis, questions about the venture capital business. So it was very difficult to raise the money. We got it done, and the fund that we raised, the first fund we raised, 2004 fund, I think will be, maybe one of the top 20 or 30 venture capital funds that have ever been raised in terms of the performance of the fund. We have just a phenomenal portfolio. We have Twitter, we have Zynga, we have Tumblr, we have Etsy, we have Indeed, we have Meetup, Return Path. I don't think what else is in there. Flurry, Discuss. We have at least 10 out of the 21 companies we invested in, I think, have the potential to be worth over $100 million. And I think at least half of them have potential or already worth more than $1 billion. And we own between 10 and 40% of these companies. So I think it's going to be a fantastic fund. And then since then we've raised 2 more funds, but we kept the fund sizes small. So we've never raised a fund that's larger than $160 million. Our partnership is still very small. We still work out of the same office, and we still are kind of a sleepy little firm. That at least the way we think about it. We have a public brand though that is very much not a sleepy little firm, and that's been really fascinating to execute as a strategy. How we can operate as a sleepy little firm with a very small partnership, and stay kind of true to our values and true to who we are, and not get caught up in empire building and all that. At the same time, build a brand that is really one of the top venture capital brands in the business today. And I think that the internet has been what's allowed us to do that, because one of of the things that just happened as a total accident was, you know, that year that we were raising our first fund in the second half of 2003 and the first half of 2004 was a tough year because we were traveling all the time, and pitching people and pitching people and pitching people, and people were saying no, 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 and we didn't have money to do deals, and in order to keep my mind active, I started writing a blog in September of 2003, and then when we started Union Square Ventures, we decided to use blogging, and now social media is probably the right word, as a way to have a voice in the world of venture capital, and to try to establish thought leadership and ultimately brand leadership. And we've been very successful at that, way beyond anything that I would ever have thought possible. And you know, the blog I write, ABC, you know, regularly gets 15,000 visits a day. And you think about that, and you know, that's, I don't know how many people fit into Madison Square Garden, but I think it's something like 18,000 or something like that. So if you think about that, that's, you know, an arena the size of Madison Square Garden-ish, reading the ABC blog every day. And it's a highly targeted audience, you know. So people, you know, who are reading it are people who are interested in technology and venture capital and entrepreneurship, which is exactly the audience we want to reach. And I certainly had no idea that was possible when I started writing it, but now not only is it possible, it's what we do. So that's my career in a nutshell. But maybe talk a little bit about New York City, and maybe I'll talk about it also from a historical perspective. So I started working as a venture capitalist in New York City. I told you that story, and at the time, you know, our portfolio was comprised almost entirely of companies in Boston and Silicon Valley, and we had to fly to find deals and compete for deals. And it's very hard to do that. And you know, we compete for deals now on the West Coast, and it's very, very hard. We're not we don't have any advantages because we can't socialize with the entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. We can't see them 5 times before we need to make an investment decision. We can't do all the things that you would want to do in a selling type of exercise in terms of schmoozing and wooing the client. And so having a local presence in these markets is really important. And I've always wanted to live and work in New York City, and I've also always wanted to be in the venture capital business. So it's always been a dream of mine to have a vibrant venture capital business in New York, and it didn't exist in 1985. When we started Flatiron Partners in the mid-90s, we thought we were going